Welcome to Your College Bound Kid.
Podcast for parents and families everywhere.
Whether you have kids that plan to attend college or you have current college students, you want them in and you want them to graduate.
And you want a quality education that makes you a more interesting person to be around. I am Mark Stucker, and I'm a college coach.
And I am Anika Madden, and I am a parent. It is Thursday, May 16th, and welcome to episode number 68, The Biggest Mistakes with Extracurricular Activities. In this week's news, Oberlin, University of Chicago, and other elite colleges extend application deadlines. And we're in chapter 68 of 171 answers, and it's about the biggest mistakes students make with their extracurricular activities. And it's time again this week for our bonus content segment. And Mark interviews Mr. Yancie Davis, the admissions officer at Macalester College, in part one of using non-cognitive variables to help with admissions decisions.
All right, Anika. I know we're both excited, but we got our first 100-word shout-out.
Yay. Love it.
So for those of you who are wondering what we're talking about, any of our donors who give 120 or more over the course of a year, they get a number of special perks, and one of them is a shout-out to their student. So let me read this. This comes from Amanita Thomas from Raleigh, North Carolina, and she says, sending a shout out to that awesome, brilliant child of mine, Ariana, who is graduating member of the George School, class of 2019. I am sending many blessings and prayers as you continue your higher education at Tuskegee University in Alabama. Daughter, mommy loves you and am very proud of your accomplishments while at the same time being blinded by your future. What do you think, Anika?
Oh, I think that's awesome. Congratulations. Shout out George School. Woo.
Yeah. Good. All good.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. I love it, love it, love it.
So you remember, Anika, this is the week we're starting our countdowns. And we are counting down. I know you love those countdowns.
I do.
So we're looking at the 9 fastest growing jobs that pay $75,000 or more, being the median pay. So at number 9, we have I'm gonna say it to you, and then I'm gonna say a little blurb, and then you can comment. Okay. So
okay.
We have an operations research analyst, and that has a growth rate projected at 27% between 2016 and 2026, which is like 4 times faster than the national average. We have a median pay of $81,390. And what do? Operations research analysts use advanced mathematical and analytical methods to help organizations investigate complex issues, identify and solve problems, and make better decisions. What is the work environment? Well, they spend most of the time in offices, although some travel does occur to meeting clients. And how do you become one? Well, the typical education requirement for an entry-level position is going to be a bachelor's degree. Some people require a master's. Analysts typically have a degree in business, operations research, management science, analytics, math, engineering, computer science, or something in the tech or quantitative field. What do you think, Anika?
I'm thinking, I don't know if I need to go through these every week because I'm just settling in on Janaea and this.
You can't be only about Janaea. It's the whole world is listening. You think I'm going to say veterinarian every single time? Vet number 9, vet number 8, vet number 7?
No. No, I'm saying, I wanted her to go into the engineering thing for so long, like something math and something,
I see.
So this is
giving
like
you engineering envy?
Giving
you engineering envy? Is that what you're saying?
Well, it's tempting me to remind her to reconsider, just to still consider some stuff. No, I'm not going to. Well, I'm going to try my best not to do that. But no, it's awesome. I love it. Love it, love it, love it. Can't wait for next week.
Remember, be careful what you ask for. This is your idea. Let's turn to college hot topics in the news.
All right, Mark, this week's article clear the voice. It is entitled Oberlin, University of Chicago, and Other Elite Colleges Extend Application Deadlines. And this is written by Miss Melissa Korn pretty recently in the Wall Street Journal. And so schools are pumping up application volumes, but rejection rates are still high. So George Washington University found that extending its application deadline helped it reach, this is what they said, helped it reach more underrepresented minorities. Now, some schools offer the extension only to seniors who began the application, but they never finished it. And then she goes on to talk about Oberlin, who extended its application deadline only by a couple of weeks. And they said that they did it because they were concerned about the stress that students suffer in their senior year and want to give them a chance to catch up. However, Ms. Korn goes on to say that she's saying that this is really a sign of the pressure that the schools are feeling to fill their incoming classes, which makes absolute sense because she then goes on to give this stat on Oberlin that they received a little over 7,500 applications. They admitted close to 3,000 and only enrolled 805 kids out of that 3,000. Yikes. So to me, I mean, I know the school's always saying they're trying to look out for the kids, and I try to believe them to a certain extent. And then here comes this vice president or assistant vice president over at University of, what did she say? University of Pacific, saying that they too are pushing the deadlines to extend opportunities for as many students as possible. So, Mark, I'm not so sure about that because it sounds like to me that they are extending the opportunity for them to not lose their jobs. So, how about please tell us what's really going on with these extended deadline
Well, I think
shenanigans?
your description was pretty good. So the first thing that I thought of is that a lot of times, Anika, as human beings, we do things with mixed motives. We have mixed motives behind a lot of what we do, So we might give somebody $100 gift card at Christmas, because we want to help them. But would we necessarily always do that if they never, ever knew it ever came from us? Sometimes, maybe not. Maybe sometimes we also want a little bit of thank you so much or attaboy or something. So it's a little bit of mixed motives can be in what we do. And I think in this case, there are a lot of mixed motives. So they're passing it off as strictly being in the best interest of the students, right? And I'm sorry, but that diversity line, I'm not going for it. That's sort of one of those things that's like trying to get a little sympathy, like, oh, aren't they being so sensitive to people of color? I think what's going on from a pure, let's talk about where I think their motives are pure, and then let's talk about where I think they're impure. So one of the colleges in this article said students are under tremendous amount of pressure, which is true, right? We know that. It's so stressful. And so if we can relieve a little bit of pressure, I'm sure that's in the back of their minds there are advantages to students to have. I mean, it's just like a teacher comes to a student and says, that paper that you thought was due tomorrow, I'm going to give you 2 more days. Like everybody in the class almost is happy about that. Right? So I think there's a little truth there.
Right.
But this is what I think is really going on. I think in most instances, it's not the one quote you said about Oberlin where they're trying to fill a class. Because what happened here is most of the schools that you quoted are pretty selective. I mean, University of Chicago, extraordinarily selective. George Washington and Oberlin, quite selective, right? Now, it is true that Oberlin has had its enrollment go down a little bit. So I think there is some truth to that. But here's what I think is going on for your really highly selectives, and there's no question in my mind. So, Anika, you ever go to an information session at a school and you hear them say, we had record enrollment in applications last year? It almost always is what you're going to hear. In fact, it's gotten to the point now that if you don't hear someone say, we smashed our record in applications, like if you hear someone say, our applications actually decreased, it's almost like, ooh, what's going on over there? It's like there's kind of some problem that I may need to know about. That's almost become the culture. So what I believe is happening is that schools are able to look at how many total applications they're about to receive. And they also have a good sense by now how many students have enrolled this time compared to last year, based on who they admitted early. Remember, this article was written in January 28th, 2019. So some students have had offers for a month and a half by now at the time of the article. And colleges can compare how their enrollment, not their applications, not their acceptances, but their enrolled students are tracking this year compared to last year at this time. They don't like what that number is going to say in comparison to previous years. That's why, like, the University of Chicago is one of the most selective schools in the country, Anika. There are very, very, very few schools with single-digit acceptance rates. And then when you get down to under 7 and 8%, you're talking about, you can almost list those number of schools on two hands, and they're in that group. Okay?
Okay.
So why would they do it? Because they want to have more applications to project momentum. More applications can mean a lower acceptance rate, and a lower acceptance rate, we've talked about this before, that is scarcity. And when there's scarcity, people feel the acceptance has more value. And if you're not, we're going to talk about this a lot more coming up, but that's what I think is going on. What do you think?
I totally agree. And I just wonder how effective that stuff is anyway, because if my child is sitting there and she hasn't gotten halfway through her application, do you think a little 2-week deadline is going to motivate her to get up and try to finish that thing? I don't think so.
Well, it's funny you say that, because do you remember there was a quote from somebody in the article that said, basically it said exactly that, right? It said, thanks, but no thanks, right?
Right, exactly.
And it's so funny because our good friend Brendan Barnard, I feel like we can never get away from him. But
I saw him pop up in there. Yeah,
he popped up in there. Maybe it's my conscience, because we busted on him for saying 6 ways when it was really 5 a couple weeks ago. Maybe,
that was all you, Mark. Yeah.
Maybe it's my conscience. But the very, very last line of the article, this is what it says. The very end, Melissa says, the traditional model of filling a class is so up in the air, says Brendan Barnard, director of college counseling at the Deerfield School, a private school in Manchester, New Hampshire. And then Brendan says this. However, he said, and I love this though. I love this. This was good. Offering to waive application fees at the last minute. Because remember, that's what they're also doing, right? Like, you'll waive your application fee. Wow, great news for you.
Right.
And extending deadlines, it may have the opposite effect than the school's intent. And then he says, it does kind of reek of desperation. So, this is a move, in my opinion, that is for the institutions more so than for the students.
Now, is it just the selective schools that are doing this? Are there any public institutions that are popping up saying, "Oh, by the way, you got 2 more weeks or 3 more weeks," or is that ever the case? Or is
I want to slightly correct something you said. So I don't want you to think private is selective and public is not, because you said, are there any public that are doing it?
Right.
Some of the schools that are in trouble the most are private schools right now. Those have been the ones that have been closing the most. So but it's a really, really, really good question by you, because there are some schools that are in trouble and they are doing it just to survive, right? Or there are, if not just survive, that's maybe a little bit of an embellishment. They're doing it so that they don't have to have massive layoffs. Remember, most schools in the country are tuition driven, Anika, meaning that most of their money is coming from tuition. So if you look like you're coming in at under projected enrollment numbers, then what does that mean? That means massive. The biggest expense for any school are faculty and staff salaries and benefits. So right away, if you're coming in under enrolled, then that's normally going to mean layoffs. So in fairness, there are some schools that, put it this way, there's some schools that if I was in charge and I saw the numbers didn't look good, I would be saying extend the deadline. So I don't want to criticize. No, I would. I think that's better than turn around and saying, you know what, we're going to chop a whole department or start doing massive layoffs or salary freezes.
Yeah, true that.
What do you think?
I think that, again, I just think about Janaea and her okay, if I didn't finish it the first time, I'm not going to do it the second time. But I think my big takeaway from all of this is that, folks, just encourage your kids to work diligently and as far ahead of time as possible to get whatever applications that you are genuinely interested in done, and all the extra, oh, you get this bone, by the way, for 2 weeks, whatever. Just stay focused. That's all I can say.
And I would say my big takeaway is I want parents and students to have a healthy level of skepticism without becoming cynical about business moves that colleges make that are in their best interest, but are dressed up as being in your best interest.
Boom.
I like that. Boom. I'm going to start ending segments with that. Boom. Can I borrow that? Boom.
It's yours.
That's like a drop the mic moment. Boom.
And the mic is dropped. We're on.
Oh, boy, we're having fun.
Now it's time for our step-by-step walkthrough of the college admissions process.
Okay, friends. We are looking at extracurricular activities today. For you first-timers, I wrote a book called 171 Answers to the Most Asked College Admissions Questions. And we hit on a couple highlights from each chapter of that book. And our episode numbers correspond with the chapter numbers. So for those of you who have the book, we encourage you to read the chapter before the episode. And if not, you still should get a lot out of it. So, Anika, what do you think? You read the chapter. What jumped out to you in this chapter?
And I say this every week, and I'm gonna continue to say it because you do it every time.
Let me guess. You like the very first line.
Yes. You just like hit the nail on the head, just straight off the gate. It's just awesome. And this week's straight off the gate is don't have the extracurriculars as your starting point. Like, don't let that be your whole center focus around your whole application. It should be more centered on who you are, what you love, what you're curious about, and what you want to learn and explore at this fine institution that you're applying to. So, I mean, of course you have like, what is it? 2, 3, 4. I have like 7 good points that you make. And I'll just note some of the ones that I can definitely relate to. And that is don't get involved in too many. But what I do want to say about that one though, Mark, is that don't just get involved in one either. Because I feel like we almost got caught up with that with Janaea and this track thing. Because, she did it for so long that she's like, you know what? I kind of don't want to be in this box anymore. And where she's still running, she's still doing well. And, that's still her thing. But we had that was a lesson for me. Like, I was like, wow, okay, well, what else you going to do? Because we had done it she'd been running since she was 5 years old. Like, that was her thing. So that's my big one.
She's got a super runner mom over there as an example.
Oh, no. She got a super runner shadow because I started running because of her. She was the one that took off first. So that one, and I'll say that this is always a difficult one for me, though, what it says, don't always be a joiner and not an emerging leader, meaning always try to play a leadership role. And I know that, they always want to put forth the effort of being a leader, but I just know sometimes that's difficult.
No, I agree. And I'm glad you're bringing that out. And so that I think it's important that we say that if you're not a leader, that's okay. You know what I mean? There's still schools out there that will appreciate you for who you are. So I'm glad you emphasize that. Okay.
And now let me highlight one more and I'll let you take it away. And that was the one about avoid using abbreviations and make sure you describe it. And I can't tell you how many times, both Janaea and Jalen, I would always have to tell them, okay, so what is that? Like, don't always assume people know what you're talking about. Like, you live and breathe this stuff all day. And Jalen would be so quick to put down a 2-3 pointer about what he was doing. And it was so much he was doing. And he just didn't ever feel like he needed to describe it. So that's a big one for me too.
Good.
We would like to thank every listener who has financially supported our show.
We want to make sure that our friends of the show know that you absolutely can make a one-time gift, or you can sign up for one of our monthly giving levels. Recently, we received a lovely letter from a college counselor who made a gift and said she wants to support the show quarterly, and that is also okay.
And if you make a one-time gift or a quarterly gift, you may still be entitled to the same benefits we extend to our monthly donors.
That's right. For a gift of $60 or more within the first 12 months, you'll get all the benefits we provide in our Sustainer plan. And a gift of $120 or more in the first 12 months, and you'll get all the benefits we offer in our Expander plan.
So to support the show, all you have to do is go to yourcollegeboundkid.com and click the donate button. Either click the monthly gift tab or the one-time gift tab.
And be sure to visit our frequently asked question page, which is also located at yourcollegeboundkid.com for more details. This is also where you can learn about the Sustainer Plan and the Enhancer Plan.
Your financial support helps us defray the sizable expenses that it takes to deliver all of this great content that is aimed to empower you and your family's college admissions journey.
Different people have different abilities to give, but whatever you can contribute will be greatly appreciated and it will allow us to remain commercial free. So thank you in advance.
Thank you.
Well, let me comment on a couple of the ones you commented on and one, maybe two others. So I would say arguably the biggest mistake, certainly in the conversation for sure, and I'm talking about mistakes in the entire application, not just with activities, is selecting your activities because you think it's going to impress the college.
Yeah.
So people come to me all the time, and that's their starting point. Like, what do I need to get involved in? And then I'm like, what do you love? And then they act like, no, you're not understanding me. What is it I need to do in order to increase my chances of getting in? So they feel like stop being dense over there. Like I'm gonna break it down so you get it, Stucker, or like that, And then I kind of push back. I push back again, right? And so I think that's the wrong question to ask about. So I challenge them and I push back. I say, what do you care about? What is it you care about? What is it you enjoy? That's going to be what I'm going to push back. And then what I'm going to say is, let me help you to build your college list in a way so that you can do the things that you enjoy and colleges will accept you and want you for who you are. Because to me, it's almost like, me and my dating examples. I'm always using dating examples and love and all this stuff.
You haven't done that in a while, actually. You haven't done that in a while.
Then I'm a loud one.
So...
Without you jumping on me.
Gave me a flashback. Go ahead.
But it's almost like, okay, you're going on a date, and so you're like a blonde. Let's say you're a brunette. You're like, oh, guy likes blondes. I got to go get a blonde wig. And I'm like 5'4", but he likes people 5'7", so let me go get 3-inch heels. Let me stop right here because I'm gonna get in trouble some more. But the bottom line is, you try to become somebody who you're not. Okay, guess what? One day they're gonna find out it's a wig. One day they're gonna find out you got heels on, and he may not like what he sees. Then, see, I stopped. I didn't get into all the makeup and cosmetic surgery and all kinds of stuff.
I had all kinds of directions going in my head, but yeah.
Hopefully
totally
before I got in trouble. So that's, you know what I mean? Like, so do what you love, be who you are, and then apply to colleges who will accept you for who you are. So that's a big one. Another one, and you touched on this one. People always, I don't say always, but this is really, really common to think more is better. Less is often more with activities. Depth is more important than breadth. Then students really have a tendency to feel like if they don't add more activities and more things to what they're doing, that colleges will not think that they've been active enough. And so like I have this survey, because, Janaea filled it out, you filled it out. And I have people list all their activities. And, it can be really, really long. And when I'm reading it, I'm like, which of these things do you care about? But what a lot of people don't know, and I'm not sure if you know this, Anika, but colleges have a very simple way through the Common App of being able to see right through this. There's actually 3 things in the Common App extracurricular activity section that tip them off whether or not you are deeply engaged or you're a dabbler. Any idea what those 3 are?
I wonder if it has to do with. No, I'm not going. Yeah, let me tell you what I was going to say.
Okay.
Which I'm already retracted, but I'm going to say it anyway. Is when you were saying that don't feel like you need to fill up the whole space. Like just because there's space there doesn't mean that you have to fill in every line with like blah 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 words. It don't mean anything. And those empty words definitely come through easily and quickly.
So that's all true. Everything you said is true, but that wasn't one of the 3. So one of the 3 ways they can tell is on the Common App, and remember, you might think, oh, you're filling the Comment app online, and all this stuff. Well, it produces a really quick summary that goes right to the key points for admissions officers to read. But the Comment app on your activity printout, it's going to say the grades that you participated in every activity. So it's going to say you did this in 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th. You did it only in 12th. You did it only in 11th. Right away, they can tell. Was this a 4-year thing, a 3-year thing, a 2-year, or a 1-year? So that's the first thing. The second thing, and it's a question you have to answer on there, which is how many hours a week did you do the activity? So if you're going to be, remember we talked about blood drive kid, Anika, who put blood drive 1 hour for the year on his activity list. Remember that?
Yeah.
If you're going to be blood drive kid and put your little, think you're impressing them with your long lists and your little 30-minute blood drive out of 365 days, you're going to be like the laugh. You're going to be the joke in the office for that day. All right. So first thing, the grades you were involved. Second thing, the hours a week. Third, the weeks per year. So it will say, okay, you did this for 36 weeks of the year. You did this for 2 weeks of the year. So they can immediately tell right away by that. And they're looking for what you care about. That's what they want to know, what you care about. And how will they measure what you care about? What did you invest your time in? They're interested in how you spend your time, including the summers. But we're going to talk more about that later. So that's really, really, really important. And I want to clarify something I've said a few times. So a few times I've said, I think it's great to start the college process in the spring of the sophomore year. And when I say that, I'm talking about getting into more systematic, comprehensive look, not obsession, because that's one reason you're starting before 11th or 12th so that you can go at a nice little leisurely jogging pace. But I'm talking about you're looking at all aspects of things. But when it comes to a couple components of the application, namely the courses that you select and the activities that you get involved in, if someone came to me and said, what would be an absolute ideal time to start out this process, maybe just starting light and we'll pick it up as we go on in time. So if the student was on board, I'm going to tell them, I know this doesn't sound early, I'm going to say it's good to start having some sessions in middle school. Not a lot, once a quarter, 7th, 8th grade, mostly to focus on curriculum and activities. 9th grade, still you can get away with once a quarter, maybe once every second month, just to make sure you're not making any mistakes when it comes to curriculum choices and activities primarily, although there are some other things. Now, every time I say this, Anika, I always appreciate you because you always say, now I don't want that 11th or 12th grade parent to hear this to start getting stressed out because they didn't do this, right? And so that's fine. We'll be fine with wherever you are. We'll meet you where you're at. And I don't just mean me, but whoever is helping you in the process. So that's important. Now, third thing, thinking that the title of your activity is going to just wow admissions officers. So I was talking with a very experienced admissions officer this week, and we were talking about, this, what the files were like, reading all the files they read this year and everything. And then one of the things that came up in the conversation was like, Mark, people continue to think that we're so impressed because they put down student body president or editor of the newspaper, and listed off a bunch of different things, senior class officer, all these different things. People continue to think that impresses us, and it doesn't. And so people think that a title really moves and shakes things up for you. And it really is not about titles. It's about impact. It's about what you did in that role. So that's the third thing that I would say. And then the last point I want to make on this is the one that you mentioned, Anika, which is what happens is, and this is so common because I have a tendency to do this with admission stuff. People get so comfortable with abbreviations for names of clubs or activities or things that they throw the abbreviations around and not realizing that, okay, that's that inside baseball talk that you're using at your school. There could be another school that may use the exact same term for something different. So sometimes it's just, what is this thing? Like one of my clients, she's always referring to GLSA, and I have to talk to her like, remember now, you need to tell me what that GLSA thing is. You keep saying GLSA. I know I'm sounding dense for the 5th time, but just spell out the long version for me. Don't give me the acronym, And so, but it's not only there. You only get 150 characters in your activity section. So that's why you need to take it on over to the additional information section where you have 650 words and really, really spell out, one, what were you involved in? What was your role? And really let the admissions officers see the picture. Any thoughts?
Well, yeah, I was thinking about the title thing because I thought that would be impressive, and I wonder if it's still impressive just with context. Like, don't think that I could just say I'm the editor
Ooh, I
of the
like that.
magazine and that's just it. But again, describing what you do. I'm the editor of the magazine and I ran 5 stories on this title or whatever. So that was kind of enlightening for me. Yeah.
Yeah, it's what you do, and it's the impact that you have. Do you remember some time ago, Anika, when I think it was episode 29, but I said you can summarize everything admissions officers are looking for in 2 words: positive impact.
Yeah.
That's it. Positive impact in the classroom, positive impact outside the classroom. That's what they're looking for. And the reason why the title in and of itself is not that impressive is there's lots of reasons. For one, some class sizes are extremely small. Like almost everybody has some type of title because the size is really small. Secondly, some schools think that they're fooling admissions officers, so they'll give lots of different people this impressive title.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? Like a whole bunch. And so yeah. So they have like 6 or 8 people that are like the senior class presidents, like, and so it's not about titles. And then also colleges know that sometimes there's politics involved, and sometimes people got certain things because they knew this person or that person, or their dad was, you know what I mean? The chairman of the board and big donor, you know what I mean? So there's just a lot of reasons why antennas are up for not being seduced just into titles.
I think I'm gonna make
So what should
Janaea
the
write the
takeaways
word.
be for our people? What should the
Well,
takeaways be?
my takeaway is I'm gonna have Janaea write the word impact and put it on her wall, like so
Good.
seriously,
I like
because I
that.
think it matters. I think that would help. And I'm all visual. Somebody that'll come in my bedroom right now will see like thousands of notes all over the wall because that's just how I function. But I've never told her to do that, and I'm just like, wait.
That's just your excuse for not being cleaner. That's how you justify.
Oh no, let me tell you, I'm the note visual queen. I'll look up and see the word Jalen phlebotomy course, and I know what I got to do to remind him tomorrow. So,
But you know what? That's good
no,
though, because the picture, I've said this before, but the mind's a picture gallery, not an encyclopedia of facts. So if you can create a
that's
little
right.
visual, and I would say that when you think impact, don't just think extracurriculars, think classroom impact. Because that's the other thing. Just like a title doesn't impress for the most selective school, a high grade doesn't impress either. It's were you just sitting there like a bump on a log getting your A, or did the whole classroom experience for everybody else get enhanced because of your presence?
Wow.
It's time for a question from one of our listeners.
Okay, Mark, it's time again where this week's question segment is for our bonus content. And yours is so relevant as it is upon us, oh my God, like right around the corner. And it is about summertime and how our students can best utilize their time during this summer that is practically here. So what you got, Mark? You got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 points for us? Or how are you going to lay this out for us?
How about 6?
I was close.
Yeah,
okay, give us those.
But in the back of my mind, I'm like thinking, okay, I don't want to get Anika's wrath for information overload, so I'm gonna try not.
You was slamming Bernard. We're gonna slam you on this 6. Yes,
but my 6 is a real 6, not 5. Okay.
See.
So the first thing that I will say is a little bit of apology. Actually, one thing I want to get better at is trying to time our content around the calendar in a way that is apropos. And while sure it's mid-May, this would have been really a good one to do in January. When some people are, or maybe even earlier, where people are looking at making plans for this summer.
True.
So I just want to throw that out there, but I still think that there's going to be some content in here that will be beneficial. But I just want to say it's something that we're trying to work on over here, time in the calendar a little better. So, so Anika, this is just a really, really, really hard question for me. And the question is people tend to come to me and they want to know. It's very, very, very similar to the extracurriculars. They kind of want to come and they sort of like, what should I do in the summer? And they're kind of looking for that magic bullet. Like, what's the best answer? And so my response is often really similar to what I say with the activities question. Right? Which is there's really not a magic bullet. There could be a lot of different things that could be good for you to do. And that's going to depend on so many factors. It's going to depend on who your child is, what your child loves, what your resources are. You know what I mean? There's just so many factors. So what I'd like to just throw out here are 6 really, really good things to consider doing in the summer. Not all 6, but like any of these 6 or maybe a couple of them. So one of them is work. And work can be absolutely great. It can be great because you need to make some money. And so, and so by the necessity, like you don't even have a choice. You need some money to do whatever. Just, your parents are making you pay for a lot of things, teach you responsibility. But that can be great. And it can be great, one, because a lot of growth occurs through work. But also colleges respect work. They respect people that they feel just haven't had life handed to them on a silver platter.
But it can also be hard too, though, Mark. Getting those jobs aren't that easy for those kids anymore. And I remember going through a little drought season with Jalen trying to find work. It was hard to find a job. Like there weren't jobs available.
Yeah, you have to work for it. It's not something. I mean, it depends. Certain. Some people have more connections than others, and some people are more persnickety about what kind of work they want to do and not do. But I do think it's an important point you're bringing up. It's not as simple as saying like, work is not the same as saying like, go walk a block, right? It's like, it isn't, it's maybe in some cases it may be easier said than done. But I'm saying there's sometimes I'd work with students have a tendency to think that work is not something that is advancing their college application. And while that's not the only reason to do it, what I'm here to say is it is highly respected by colleges as something to do. And
Gotcha.
Should I tell a story? Yes, no. What do you think?
No, let's go to number 2.
You know what that means? That means I don't trust that you can keep it under 60 or 90 seconds. I know you, so or either that or your stories are boring. I've heard too many of them.
Not boring, but we just
okay. Well, I want to say my little line before I tell my story. So I'm gonna get that story. One of these other episodes, I'm gonna sneak it in. You watch, but not now. So when you work, have the most positive attitude of any employee. Make that your goal. You're gonna have the most positive attitude of anyone, and you're gonna be the hardest worker. And I would love for you to ask for a recommendation, an outside recommendation from your employer afterward. That could be very, very powerful to have a recommendation from an employer saying, you had stories in there, examples of how your positive attitude, you being the hardest worker, you being a team player, you being reliable, how you overcame a hardship and didn't quit. With examples, that could be really, really powerful. All right, number 2.
Yeah, that could.
So if there's an activity you're interested in doing in college, like go deeper in it, right? Like Janae is jogging, Joy's basketball, people debate, robotics, singing, art, theater. Like go deep in your extracurricular and take it to the next level and really work on that. So that's a really, really noble cause for you to do. You know what? I'll say number 3, and then I'll ask you if you have any comments on the first 3. The third one would be confirming what it is that you love. So things like interest inventories and that, and then turning them into shadow days, internships, paid or unpaid. So now you're exploring what you want to do with your life, and you're putting it to the test. And so summer can be a great opportunity to do that because you don't have all the demands of school. So any thoughts so far, Anika, on either work, extracurricular activity, or not just extracurricular activity, I'm sorry, some type of activity that you may want to do in college that you're working on sharpening your skill set for, sports, arts, or internship, shadow day, anything like that? What do you think?
Only that number 3 is my favorite. Like really affirming that what you really want to do, like really sharpening or honing your interest and your skill set. I like that one the best.
I mean, I love that one. And we know Jalen did that with his shadowing of doctors. And we remember that helped him a lot figure out what he wanted to do and not do.
Oh, man. That was huge. Yeah.
Yeah. And he was doing that back in high school. Was that between 10th and 11th or 11th and 12th? I remember that.
Yeah, I think it was like summer leading up to junior year. I think. Yep.
Like that. No, that was a rich experience. And he worked his network for that. So number 4, and this is something that both your Jalen and my Karis did. A college residential experience on a college, right? Both of our kids did the 3-week July experience, which helped confirm for them that Davidson was where they wanted to go. And I think it helped their preparation and transition in a lot of ways. So a summer residential college type experience. Now, we don't have time to answer this here because it could be a whole entire podcast. But it's a complex question, kind of beyond the scope of this discussion of, is it worth it for me to spend all this money to go to XYZ school? Does it increase my chances of getting in? Because the answer in some cases is yes, and the answer in most cases is no. It just depends on the school, but we can't take that on here. So I'll just say for now, having some type of college residential experience. It really doesn't have to be a residential college experience. It can be a course at a local community college or an online course. Number 5 would be, the summer is an amazing time to work on your scores. You have more time now to really work on your test scores. And it's without having to balance all those classes. And now that they offer the ACT and the SAT in the summer, it depends on the kid, but for most kids, this is when they can really have their most time to really kind of nail down their test scores and get that part sort of taken care of their application.
June 1st, SAT.
Is that when Janae's taking it? Coming up?
Yeah.
And then the last one I'll say is substantial community service. So it's more blessed to give than receive. This is a great chance for you to give back in an area that interests you. But there's other things I could have said in here as well, Anika, like research. Summer is a great time for research. Summer is a great time just to do a lot of reading. You want to keep your mind sharp. Like, keep your mind sharp. Do math, do reading, look at webinars, podcasts. So keeping your mind sharp. I'm just assuming that no matter what you're doing, because the idea is not like you pick one of these, but pick a couple of them. So what do you think about the last 4 I threw out there?
Well, I actually have a question because I heard a parent say, I don't mean to add on to the list, but I was listening to a parent say, oh, yeah, I'm going to get some visits in over the summer for schools. And in my mind, I was like, do you want to visit a school over the summer? I didn't think, because there's no school in session. So,
Anika, I can't believe I left that off the list.
Oh, look at that.
Absolutely. I can't believe I left that off the list. Summer can be a great time to visit.
Really? But school isn't in session, though.
No. School is oftentimes in. Don't go when everything's completely closed down.
Oh, I guess they do have summer school. Okay.
Yes. Go. Go when there's some students around, but it can be a great time because you have more time then. And a lot of times, like the big trip that Karis and I took to California just before 11th grade for her, she was able to have some really serious conversations with admissions counselors, faculty, in a way that is harder to do when the admissions officers
are tours going on during the
not just tours, but not just tours in the fall. In the fall, admissions officers are on reading season. Travel season.
Right.
Travel season is in the fall. Reading season is next. So it's like, we would visit a school and then we'd sit down and talk with the admissions officer about the school.
Excellent. That actually makes me feel better.
Yeah. Well, I tell you what makes me feel better. That you saved me from forgetting something as important as college visits.
Well, but let me tell you. Let me tell you, because we got a couple in, but I was like, man, time. Like, you look up and it's darn 3 months later, and I honestly thought that the summertime wasn't a good time to visit schools. And if that's the case, my pressure is lifted. Like, we'll probably go back again in the fall when it's even more active, but.
Now, we
That's
talked
good
about
to
this
know.
before, Nika. You just
I
forget.
know,
You
Mark,
forget.
and you
That's
know
come up
what?
before in this podcast.
Let me tell you what I just told somebody the other day. I said
I'm
Mark
going to
will
go
come
find
at
the
me.
episode. I'm going to find the episode and the timestamp if
Let
you need
me
me to send it to you.
let me tell you what I told him. I said Mark will
Okay.
slap me on the legs, talking about I should have remembered that, and I'm like, Mark, I can't remember all this stuff. I have to remind you that I am not the sponge that you are. Hence the reason why we have these recordings, and I'm gonna go back and reflect and probably start all over and listen to them 3
Oh,
times over.
you're making me laugh. You know
I
that
promise I just told them that like 2 days ago. I was like, Mark slapped me in the face, or not slapped me in the face, but slapped my hand about not knowing something. I was like, of course, I can't remember that. I can't remember everything. But
now you're
again,
talking about me behind my back. You're talking about me behind my back. You're accusing me of being abusive because in 2 minutes I've already slapped you in the leg, in the face, in the hand. So now I'm abusive, and you talk about me behind my back.
Oh no! Do you remember that time I told you gave me a Mark Stucker whooping? I did something over some school. I can't remember what it was, but yeah, that's what I'll call
I
it, a Mark
remember.
Stucker whooping.
I remember the one
Yeah.
time when we got off the podcast, and you were like, "Cut out that 40 seconds." I remember that. Remember that? Delete that 40 seconds. And I was like, "What? What did I say?" I remember that.
Sorry, folks, we digress. However, this does make me happy. I'm sorry. It just reminds me to be happy because I am going to get it in over the summer. Like, make some hardcore visits. And you're right. That would be a more quiet time to sit and talk to people, which makes perfect sense. I love it.
But just remember another thing I said about visits. Like, don't stress out if you can't get to all of your schools. Everybody I work with, almost everybody I work with, Anika, no matter how much money they have or how little money they have, either money or time gets them from being able to visit every school. I mean, I have some that get to all of them, but those that they start early, and it's just hard. It's hard to get to all of them. So I don't want you to feel, some kind of way if you can't get to all your schools. There's time for that in the spring as well. All right. I'm still mad I never got to tell my story, but I won't hold it against you. I'm just sneaking in another episode.
On to the question from listener.
You're not changing your mind either.
No, we can't even do that this week. This is bonus content.
Okay. Okay, friends, you're in for a treat. One of the real emerging spokespersons on the admissions trail and in the admissions world is with us today, Mr. Yancie Davis. And in part 1 of what will be a 3-part interview of a topic I think a lot of people have never heard about, non-cognitive variables and how they impact admissions. But in part 1, Yancie will give his background. He'll talk about different colleges he's worked at and what roles he's had at those colleges, as well as what he's doing now. He'll also tell us what non-cognitive variables are and the academic research behind using non-cognitive variables in admissions. He'll tell us why some colleges are using non-cognitive variables to assist them. And he'll also answer the question, are PQs and non-cognitive variables the same thing? And he'll talk about the first 2 of 8 non-cognitive variables that he uses and that schools like Stanford and Macalester, other places he has worked at, are using in their admissions decisions. And Yancie and I have a great conversation about why highly selective schools need ways to look for kids beyond just the numbers. Listen and enjoy.
And now, this week's interview with a special guest.
I'm here with Yancie Davis from Macalester College. Welcome to the Your College Bound Kid podcast, Yancie.
Thank you for having me.
So I met Yancie about half a year ago here in Atlanta at a school named Drew Charter. Yancie and 3 other admission officers from Stanford, one from Virginia Tech, and one from Texas Christian spent about a full day with about 20 college counselors going over how we could more effectively work together. And I was really impressed with Yancie's knowledge and his communication skills, so I asked him to join us today. And friends, you're in for a treat. But why don't we kick it off, Yancie, by telling us a little bit more about your background, any colleges you've worked at, various roles you've had. Give us 3 minutes or so and let us get to know you a bit more.
Sure. So I was born and raised in Oakland, California. I'm a first-generation college graduate. I did my undergrad at the University of California, Berkeley. And during my time at UC Berkeley is where I really started to kind of get engaged with, helping students, particularly underrepresented students, be able to access schools like UC Berkeley and finding the advantages of higher education. Because for me, it was particularly a way for me to be able to, really change the trajectory of my life. I really enjoyed my experience in undergrad. So after I graduated, I dabbled a little bit in for-profit work, and eventually made my way back around to working on the nonprofit side. And I got the opportunity to run some college access programs in my hometown of Oakland. And I was in the college access and nonprofit space for about 6 years before I made the transition over into admissions, where I went to go work at Stanford University in their admissions office. And while I was there, I had an opportunity to work a little bit on their marketing and communications team. But my most significant work was with the diversity outreach team in the admissions office there at Stanford. During my time there, I had an opportunity to really be able to kind of, go from just kind of working with students in my hometown of Oakland and being able to have the opportunity to step into spaces around the country to be able to talk more about the importance of education and the importance of college for students. From there, I left Stanford and made my way here to Macalester College, where I currently serve as the Associate Director of Admissions and Multicultural Recruitment here in the office. I've been here a little bit over a year, and it's been a good time.
Fantastic, and very exciting. So, we know there are so many factors other than test scores and grades and curriculum and extracurriculars and even teacher recommendations that are highly correlated to success, both on the college campus and really in life. And Yancie's actually here to talk about a very important contribution to how to use these other factors to make accurate admissions decisions. And a term has emerged grounded in research that is called non-cognitive variables. And Yancie, this is a term, non-cognitive variables, that I think it may have come up one time in our podcast. I know we've never had a guest on here. Tell our listeners just exactly what non-cognitive variables are.
Absolutely. So non-cognitive variables refer to they relate to the adjustment, motivation, and student perceptions, rather than focusing on like traditional verbal or quantitative areas that you kind of get from standardized tests. So these non-cognitive variables really allow students to kind of like emerge in the admissions process, kind of like in absence or kind of like in addition to what you might see or get from, the SAT or the ACT or other standardized tests. They really help kind of like account for different backgrounds, and they really, just help admissions officers in the evaluation process by giving us a way to better assess student ability and potential on the whole.
So did your understanding of this sort of resonate and ring true with you? Like, what was your experience like going from being a first-generation kid in Oakland to Cal Berkeley on the college campus?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I think the high school that I went to, Castlemont High School, is in inner city Oakland. And I think, I was, among the top of the students in my class. And I was a good student for kind of what was there and what was available for our school. But I think when you think about the larger landscape, that I wasn't coming from a school that provided us with test prep opportunities. And so for me, I had good grades, but my test scores were not that good. And so I think, kind of thinking back on it, having a chance to kind of work in admissions and think about my own experience making that transition, that I definitely think that it does ring true, because I think it gave an opportunity to really be able to kind of like, I guess, highlight some of the things that I had been going through personally, and how I was able to kind of like show excellence in my application beyond just the test scores. And funny enough, I think the conversation about non-cognitive variables really started to pop up around the time when I was transitioning, from high school to college.
Nice. So Yancie, I've done some research since we first came up with this topic. And I'm really excited because Yancie suggested this to me, and I knew right away this was something we wanted to talk about. But I want to read. It's kind of a lengthier quote to you, and get your opinions on it. So this is actually from a paper, an article that was written by William Sedlacek. Am I saying his name right? Because he seems like he's one of the leaders on this. But He's from the Counseling Center at the University of Maryland at College Park. And he entitled this paper called Employing Non-Cognitive Variables in the Admission and Retention of Non-Traditional Students. And so I want to read this to you and just kind of get your thoughts on what he said. So Sternberg gives us a clue why a relationship might exist between traditional experiences and non-cognitive variables. He proposes that there are three basic ways a person may show ability. There's what he calls componential intelligence, the ability to interpret information hierarchically and taxonomically in a relatively unchanging context. This is an ability associated with the traditional experience in our society. So he goes on to say, if your situation was not relatively stable, or if your context was other than traditional, you are likely to have more trouble showing your ability in this way. And he says traditional admission measures standardized tests, prior grades, and relies heavily on this. Then there's what he calls experiential intelligence, which involves the ability to interpret information in changing contexts and to be creative. He says a person with non-traditional experiences may have had to develop and demonstrate this kind of intelligence to be successful. And then finally, he says the third type of intelligence Sternberg calls contextual. This type has to do with the ability to understand and work the system to your advantage. For a person with a non-traditional background, it is critical to know how to interpret the system in terms that foster his or her development. And then the last thing he says there is evidence that many different groups have non-traditional background experiences and can be more accurately assessed using non-cognitive variables. And then he lists 10 groups that, according to research, he says will be better assessed if these non-cognitive variables are included. And the 10 groups he lists are Blacks, Hispanics, Asian Americans, Native Americans, international students, athletes, students with physical disabilities, commuting students, women, older students, gay, lesbian, bisexual. So that was a lot. It was a mouthful, but I just want to get your take on that.
No, I think that it's absolutely spot on. I think what we do know is that we as a society is becoming more and more diverse. And I think that the idea of what success looks like is going to look different and different. And I think that speaks to that idea that, not all students go to the same type of kind of like high school experience. Different high schools have different resources. They have different kind of like focus on how they measure success. We know that some schools give grades. We know that some schools give stars. We know that, some schools, they're all set up in a lot of different ways. And so, I think the focus of using these non-cognitive variables in an admissions context is that it really allows the students to be able to, or us as admissions officers, to be able to kind of like find that success in a student in their application, knowing that, their applications might look different, understanding that a student might be coming from a situation where a 3.5 in their context might be because that school might be notoriously hard for grading. Mm-hmm. And when you're at a school where you have a bunch of students who are applying and have, 4.0s or having higher test scores, do we want that student to be disadvantaged because of the context in which they're coming from, where, that 3.5 might look good to them in their context, but when we're reading a bunch of applications, it might look like that student isn't standing out. So how do we go beyond those numbers to be able to find the success a student can bring to a college, especially when us as admissions officers, our goal is not to take every student that has a 4.0 and perfect test scores. Our goal is to try to put together the most successful and most well-rounded classes that we can to be able to enhance the learning experiences for the students as they're coming in to the college. And that's where diversity helps out, because we want students from these different backgrounds who have these different measures and types of success to be able to come to our college campuses to be able to learn from one another. And I think the use of non-cognitive variables helps facilitate that.
I'm really glad you mentioned that, the goal is to assemble the best class, because I don't think that's something that people can hear enough, because let's face it, America is the great land of meritocracy, and it's all about its rugged individualism. And it kind of goes against every fiber in people's being, right? To think mm-hmm. collectively. I mean, I try constantly to use sports illustrations, and I say, look, an amazing football team doesn't need 7 quarterbacks, right? You need linemen, you need receivers, or for music people, I like to use the orchestra example but it goes against something I think in human nature that we're raised with as Americans. And I think you can't say that enough.
Let's take a break to learn about Mark's recommended resource for the week.
The recommended resource for episode 68 is the book, The Freshman Survival Guide. And yes, this book is exactly as its name describes. The subtitle is Soulful Advice for Studying, Socializing, and Everything In Between. I recommend you get the updated version, which is the 2016 edition. And the book is written by Nora Bradbury-Haehl and Bill McGarvey. The book helps the new college student to navigate through the first year of college. The book speaks to college students in their own language, and it offers practical tools that readers need to keep from drinking, sleeping, or skipping their way out of college. We'll now return to my interview with Yancie Davis on non-cognitive variables and how they're used in the college admission process. But let's talk about the research. I know this non-cognitive variable is not something that just dropped out of the sky. There's some research behind it. What can you tell us, our listeners, about the research?
Absolutely. So you mentioned Professor William Sedlacek, who is a professor emeritus at the University of Maryland and works inside their college counseling center. He has really been one of the driving academians as it pertains to non-cognitive variables in the admissions context. And so he has been, kind of working at this, since the late 1990s, early 2000s, and really bringing this up to the forefront in terms of how are we working to kind of like go with kind of like the idea that students have gotten to the point where kind of like that the big test, the SAT and the ACT, that we understand that students can come and might have issues with taking that test just because of the inequality that's come behind how students arrive at that big test. And so he, has really helped kind of like move forward the conversation around how we are focusing on these different variables in order to really help us out if we are seeking to kind of like remain that variance in terms of kind of like, bringing the non-traditional student to our college campuses. Because, I think we're all, as college campuses, wanting to make sure that we are being reflective of the society that we are trying to educate. And I think as we're all moving forward to try to be more and more diverse and reflect that community in which we have, that these non-cognitive variables and the studies that have gone along with it has been really important.
So that's great. So Yancie, I often hear, the term PQs, an acronym for personal qualities, used when I talk with admission officers. Are PQs and non-cognitive variables the same, or is there a difference?
I would say that they can be used interchangeably. I think when you think about the idea of non-cognitive variables, that it definitely kind of puts some framework around PQs. Because I think, PQs in itself can kind of like refer to everything under the sun that like is like the personal qualities that a student might bring to the table. And I think non-cognitive variables tries to add some framework to that.
Great. Well, I'm sure we got the listener out there thinking, you've said this term non-cognitive variables like 12 times. What is it? So I'm sure.
Yes.
So let's get into specifics. Yancie sent me a great document where he listed 8 non-cognitive variables. And I'd actually like to go through all 8 of them. So let's start out with the first one, which was included in the document you sent, as well as I saw it also in the research by our professor at Maryland, and that's positive self-concept. So one of my questions for you here is, how are you able to discern if someone has a positive self-concept in the admission process, and also why is that important?
Yeah, absolutely. So, positive self-concept kind of refers to a student demonstrating things such as confidence, strength of character, determination, or, independence. So just really that student has a positive view of themselves. And I think we kind of discern that in the process, see that in several ways in the application. The student might talk about that in their essays in terms of, kind of like how they have in a way started to persist, through a situation, or how they've been determined to do something. I think a common thing you see in an application or an essay is that student who maybe they tried out for a team one year and they didn't make it, but they were determined to kind of like stick through and try to, achieve that goal that they set for themselves. And so that they move forward with a plan that they created for themselves to kind of like achieve that goal in which they have. So just having that idea of just really being focused on who they are as a person, and seeing that kind of persist over time.
That's great. That's great. And one of the things I love about the non-cognitive variables is they're not just incredibly indicative of who may excel on a college campus, but these things apply to life. This is about life too. It's not just the 4 years on the college campus. So yeah. So let's go to the second one, which is realistic self-appraisal. So really have the same question for you here. Like, how can you tell if someone has realistic self-appraisal? Is it the essays again?
No, I think there are other areas in the application that which you can be able to discern this. So realistic self-appraisal refers to or talks about a student being able to recognize or accept any strengths or deficiencies that they have, particularly academically, and kind of like how do they work hard at developing themselves, and maybe even recognizing the need to be able to broaden their individuality in a way. So I think that, you can definitely see this in an academic record or a student's academic interest. We also might get information about this from, teacher letters of recommendation as well. As a student, is really taking the opportunity to kind of like think about what they might be or might not be good at. So, for example, if a student has, for example, maybe struggled with math over the course of their high school, they've gotten B's and C's over their time there. Is that student kind of like headstrong and thinking that they're going to be a physicist or a engineer, or do they kind of like talk a little bit about how, as they struggle with this and started to kind of like realize how they can approach what they want to do academically, knowing that that's kind of like that might be a deficiency for them. So I think that's just an example of just a student kind of like really kind of like taking that time to appraise where they are and what they are or might not be good at.
So this is great. I love this. Before we go to our third variable, Yancie, I think we should just let's give the big picture. So, there's schools out there, and there are a lot of them that just crunch numbers, right? They do admissions by the numbers. They're admitting students normally based on just test scores, grade point average, curriculum. In most cases, those are less selective schools. Occasionally it's a selective school, but then there's another group of schools that do what we call holistic admissions. And as you know, Yancie, there's a lot of people that claim they do holistic admissions because the public likes to hear that. Holistic admissions meaning we're looking at the whole child in all of the complexities. But a lot of schools that say they do holistic admissions really aren't doing it. That's my view. I'm sure you probably agree with that. But I think there's another group of schools that do what I call full-blown holistic admissions. And I think this is what we're talking about here. Do you want to talk about the type of schools that are looking at non-cognitive variables? And do you find a correlation between more selective schools that are using this, more well-resourced schools? You want to comment on that at all?
Yeah, I would. I think that definitely it is something that when you look at the more selective institutions, they in a way they need to be able to use these, because again, at the more selective schools, you're getting more students that apply than they have spaces to be able to fill the class. And so I think then you have to be able to discern, especially when you're getting to again that level where one of the things that was, said often when I was at Stanford, that there are more students that apply again with perfect, SAT scores and 4.0s, and they could fill the class with that. But that's not what they want to fill the class with. So how do you identify success in an alternative way to that? How do students stand out beyond just the numbers? Because we want students to know that they are more than just numbers in an application process. We understand the different things that they bring to the table. And as we're having to put together these classes, that again, that's where we find that information of how students bring different things to the table. So you definitely are going to see it at more selective institutions. And I think particularly it's how and when it's being used that is definitely more important as well. The idea of using these non-cognitive variables to really be able to understand what success looks like from different backgrounds, from different communities, and from different cultures. I think is a really important thread to not be missed when we're talking about non-cognitive variables.
Great.
Next week in the news, non-degree badges are booming, but are they useful? And we'll be in chapter 69 of 171 answers. And Mark is talking us through what your child needs to know about college admissions interviews. And next week's question is from a mom who wants to know if she can get refunded after signing up for the SAT or the ACT if her child no longer needs to take the test. And Mark continues his interview with Mr. Yancie Davis in part 2 of using non-cognitive variables to help with admission decisions.
By the time everybody hears this, you will have had Mother's Day. So just shout out to all the mothers, including yourself, and all the mothers who listen, who've birthed and raised all these great kids who we're trying to help. So I know that we're a few days late, but we're recording this the day before Mother's Day. So shout out to the moms in the world.
That's right. Happy Mother's Day, Anitra. Happy Mother's Day. And that's our show. A big thank you to you, our listeners, for tuning in this week. And if you found this podcast helpful, it would help us tremendously if you would subscribe and write us a review on your favorite podcast listening station. And please be sure to click the share button and send this to someone you know that could really use this information. Your College Bound Kid is produced by John Lockenbaugh. The amazing music that you hear is by Victor Allen Weeks. Artwork is by Andrea Togo. And marketing designs are by Kimberly Blass. If you want to get a copy of the book 171 Answers to the Most Asked College Admissions Questions, you can go right to 171answers.com. And if you want to have a college coaching session with Mark, you can send him a text to area code 404-664-4340.
And if you have a question or a few questions that you would like for us to answer on the show, please email us at questions@yourcollegeboundkid.com. That's questions with an S at yourcollegeboundkid.com. Every week, we'll take one question and include it in the episode. We don't like your questions. We love your questions, so send them our way. And by the way, check out our website, which is just simply yourcollegeboundkid.com. Again, we thank you for tuning in, and we look forward to meeting with you again next week.